There's some good news for Porsche enthusiasts here this week, because it sounds like despite the manual not being offered for the first time on the Carrera S, which I just talked about recently, the head of Porsche's GT division seems adamant on them remaining for the GT3 at least. Talking to Motor One at the media drive for the new GT3, he said, "From my personal point of view, it was always super important to have a manual." And even has said here, "I prefer a manual as a driver's car. I don't mind shifting a car even on the track, knowing exactly that the PDK is faster. I think it's always good to have choices, and it was always in my head, even on the 991, to bring back the manual transmission, which we did through the 911R." He also gave us some interesting tidbits of info here that kind of contradicts what we've been hearing from Europe in regards to why the manual transmission has been going away. This is the justification that like Volkswagen gave for the demise of the GTI and the Golf R manual is, well, we have to do it for emissions regulations, and the manual is worse for emissions. And maybe in testing purposes it is in that environment, but that doesn't seem to be the case in the real world here with the same person here saying, in regards to at least the GT3, the manual is lighter, so it contributes to better consumption and to less emissions. And you have more power at the wheel because the internal resistance of a manual gearbox is substantially lower than on a PDK. You don't have a power pack that has to produce hydraulic power for the clutch system. You don't have two clutches that run through a wet sump, which is resistance as well. In real world, the manual car uses less gas and therefore puts out less emissions than the PDK. That's a fact. So, there you have it. Again, maybe there is some explanation for why the situation would be different for, these other manual cars that are supposedly going away due to emissions. It's one thing if manuals go away because of take rate. If people just don't want it, that's one thing. But, GTI, for example, had a really great manual take rate. There was no good reason to get rid of it, especially if now the, apparently, at least, if it's the same kind of setup as the dual clutch and the PDK, it's going to be worse for emissions. But again, maybe in a lab, it performs better, and that's all that matters to Volkswagen. I don't know, but that was just new info that I had not previously heard from any other engineers or anything about manual versus dual clutches. So that was really interesting. I'm happy that he shared that. So yeah, I don't know, I'd love to hear more about this from other engineers and other people in the industry here. But lastly, to really drive the point home here about their commitment to the manual in the GT3, he said, "The manual in combination with the high revving 9,000 RPM ICE engine is just such a big, huge fun factor. I think we are in the entertainment business with this car. It's not a means of transportation. We have to go for the smiles." And man, it's so refreshing to hear Porsche say this. They were a company like many others, especially European companies, that were chasing lap times, chasing the fastest, 0 to 60 time the fastest everything. And the PDK is certainly that. He acknowledges that. But it seems like they've really had an awakening as far as just realizing, look, it's about fun. Let's put our pride aside. Let's, drop the whole, elitist thing of having to be the fastest in every way. And let's just put smiles on faces. I want to stand up and applaud Porsche for this interview. This is fantastic to hear all this stuff. So good. I'm so glad that Motor One had this conversation with them. Also, it appears that buyers agree with him here because, at least in the U.S., they also shared the U.S. take rate. The take rate for the manual on the GT3 is at 46% currently, and on the GT3 Touring, it's an impressive 75% of buyers that go for the manual transmission in these things. So, good job, Porsche GT3 buyers, on speccing the manual, and especially those touring buyers for going for the manual especially. That is fantastic, and this is how you keep the manual alive. This is how you do it. I know not everyone has the luxury of buying a manual Porsche or a manual anything new, but for those who do, this is how you keep this stuff around. Send a clear message, not just, a tiny little take rate, but a giant amount of people buying the manuals. That's how you keep it around. And now we see, Porsche was on its path to, keep everything be PDK, and then, they started to see this demand for the manual, and then they started to see people actually putting their money where their mouth is and buying these things, and now we have awesome manuals in Porsches still, and this is just such fantastic news. Sorry, it really fires me up. So Awesome to hear that. And man, I wish I could afford one of those GT3s to support the cause.